think what did Bill Gates say recently? It was 5-10 years ago. He said, talking about DNA. Okay, DNA, real quickly, has, how many letter codes does DNA have?
200 something.
A, G, C, T. That's it. 4 letter codes. And he said, all of DNA is based on a 4-letter code sequence. And he said, if we could develop something like this, it would be, he said, we can't even conceive of anything this technologically advanced, right? And we attribute that to evolution. Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine it? Here we're saying, oh yeah, evolution did this thing. When it's 4-letter codes, and that's why I say the Bible is so incredibly complex, is because it's based on 22-letter codes. And there is more information in the Bible than we could ever comprehend. We can't even get our head around this, 4-letter codes. Imagine what is hidden in here with 22-letter codes. Unbelievable. Absolutely astonishing. So that's why when people say, oh, I read the Bible, you know, Dad said that to me one time. My father, he says, I read the Bible once, and I'm like, you haven't even started, man. You haven't even... Pastor Ross, a pastor at Temple Baptist Church here, said to me one time, he knew a guy that had a photographic memory. He could memorize anything. He was hugely, hugely intelligent. And he said, if I come across a very technical, like a chemistry book or, you know, a scientific manual, I may have to read it twice, but I've got it. And I know everything that's on that book, and I can, in my mind, refer to it. He said, I have read the Bible again and again and again, and I can't even come close to mastering it. It is amazing. It is. And people just dismiss it as, oh, it's just a bunch of myths and fairy tales. This is the most incredible book on earth. It is absolutely without equal, without compare, it's incomparable, whatever. I get astonished at just thinking about the immensity of the Bible. I'm sorry I have to go. Love you. Don't forget your things. Okay, so anyway, he formed the man, verse 8. Somebody, verse 8.
The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed.
Okay, so here, this is the first mentioning of Eden. Now, before we get there, this is just Charlie. I'm not saying that this is correct, but I'm just kind of making my own inference from the Bible. Is the Garden of Eden still somewhere?
Probably.
Yeah, you know, I would think so, because it says, and we're going to get to it, but I like to think about this. It says he placed cherubim with flaming sword to guard it.
Probably, don't you think more of spiritual?
Well,
because our spiritual self was...
You know, I'm not... spiritual, I don't want to say spiritual, but I do want... It's a physical, real place. A different something. And the reason why is because the book of Revelation says that the tree of knowledge or tree of life is there, which is what's being guarded. Okay? So that tree is still somewhere. And there's no point in guarding something if it's not there. And angels were put there to guard it. Right? To guard access from it. Now,
guard it from us.
Well, that's right, because, you know, what is it that... What restores access to the garden? Well, think about it this way. Where is the garden mentioned in the Bible? I got to get rid of some of the stuff. I got way too much going on here. Where is the Garden of Eden mentioned in the Bible? This is just something that it's just kind of fun to think about. It's mentioned right up at the beginning, right? And then 66 chapters later, we come up and we have the garden mentioned again. I mean, it may not be exactly the same, but it's got the tree of life. It's got, you know, all this stuff. Well, where is another garden mentioned in the Bible? What's that?
Mount of Olives.
The Gethsemane.
Gethsemane. Absolutely. Jesus, right in the middle of the Bible, or we would call it the middle of the Bible, not the literal middle, but the middle of the Bible, Jesus is there restoring this to us. Right? He's in the garden. And what is it? Gethsemane, the olive press is where he was at. And that's a picture of his suffering, the pressure being on him, you know, and the sweating of blood, just like an olive would press out all of this. Anyway, so he is restoring to us. He is the access to the Garden of Eden. All right? That's absolutely clear. The Bible makes that clear, is that we have access restored because of Jesus. And it's just kind of neat how there's these 3 gardens. There's some point that I'm missing on this. But anyway, it's... you can't have a need to guard something. And this is something I'm going to talk about. I'm going to mention. I hate to say things that I will someday mention again in a sermon, but what?
We're going to remember.
Well, I know, but you'd remember something like this. What is the benefit of taking us out of the Garden of Eden? I mean, what is the good of that? And I don't want to, if I say it too clearly, then you're just going to jump to, I want you to think, why?
Show us how we need.
That's one thing. What would be the result if we were still in the Garden of Eden? Okay, we're going to get to it. We're going to get to these verses and we're going to go over it again. The what?
We might not give good credit to God. We might think, this is all ours.
Well, that's true, but that's getting ahead of yourself. What I'm getting at here is that there are in the Garden of Eden, there's two trees. You've got the knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and you've got the tree of life. Okay, and we're going to get to this, and I'm going to repeat it again. But I just want you to think about this. They now have eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? He says specifically, let's get them out of here before they eat this and live forever. So what is the benefit of getting us out of there before we do this?
Salvation. They live eternally in hell and sins.
That is exactly it. Can you imagine an eternal being corrupted by sin? Can you imagine? I mean, look at what they did in 900 years or 960, the wickedness was abounding on the earth. And now how old do we live? 70, 80 years, some people up to 100, but, our bodies are completely worn out by then. But we don't live very long, and look at the world right now. What he said is absolutely right. You talk about doing us a favor. Doing us a favor it would be a catastrophe. It would be an absolute catastrophe if we live forever. And that's the point. Yeah. Well, you can say, well, what about, us going to live forever with Jesus? Well, we are covered by his righteousness. We are redeemed by him, and we will be given a body, an attitude where we won't sin anymore. But in the state that he made us, if we continued to live, it would have been a disaster. Absolutely. I'm sorry to think this way. This is just what I think all the time, and I'm trying to get these thoughts out to you. And if they don't make sense, they do to me. I hope they do. Okay. They obviously made sense to him. That one did. But I think these things, and I think, man, the wisdom that's involved in every decision is just immense. Here we look and we say, oh, life is so bad, and why did my dog have to die, or this or that? This is all for our benefit. I got to tell you what, every bit of it. Anyway, go ahead. Somebody read the next verse.
And out of the ground the Lord God made to spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil.
Okay, now, he says that out of the ground, where was that? That was verse 9. Out of the ground, the Lord God made every tree grow that it was pleasant to the sight and good for food, right? Well, that's going back to the third day. Remember I said that all of this is an insert into that account, days 1 through 6. All right, so the third day, it says here, let the... where is it? Herb yields seed, fruit tree yields fruit according to its kind of seed. So this is a recount of what's going on, and it's following this pattern. So this is an insert into the third day. Now, did this literally happen on the third day or not? That's the question. We went through that before. And how do we know for certain that this actually happened in a 24-hour time frame? And I do believe that we made a good case for that. So this is a literal 24-hour day, and he's giving us a what's the term? I always use the wrong term when reiteration of the third day in that account. All right? And then he goes on to say the tree of life was also in the midst of the garden. That's the one we talked about. And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life is mentioned first. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is mentioned later. And it follows this kind of pattern, this second and first throughout the Bible. And if you look at why one says, one is first and one is second, and then you end up with the first at the end, right? It's just, everything in the Bible follows this beautiful symmetry. So anyway, go ahead. Where were we? 10. Go ahead.
A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and they're divided and contain 4 rivers.
Okay. Keep going.
The name of the first is the
Pishon, right?
It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold.
Okay, keep going.
And the gold of that land is good. The Devalim or
Yeah,
onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is the Tigris, which flows out of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates.
Okay, there are 4 rivers that are mentioned there. The Pishon, all right, and then you have the Tigris, the Euphrates, and in Hebrew the Tigris is called Hiddekel. That's how it's translated in this Bible, and that's, and then you have the Gihon. 3 of those rivers we still know where they are. Anybody know which ones?
Well, Tigris and Euphrates, but I don't know what the third one is.
You don't?
Still no. No.
You sure? Okay. Now I'm not saying that this is. I'm not saying that this is specifically the same river, but it does have the same name and it runs directly under Jerusalem. Is the Gihon?
Oh, really?
All right.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Hey, go to the Book of Kings, and it's probably 1 Kings. 1 or 2 would be my guess. All right, and it says here, call Bathsheba, and then, okay, read 1 Kings 1 and go to verse 32. And when you get there, just go ahead and read.
King David said, call to me Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah, I don't know how to pronounce it, Benaiah, the son of Yehoiada, so that they came before the king.
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. The king also said to them, take with you the servants of your Lord, and have Solomon my son ride on my own mule, and take him down to the Gihon.
There you go. So whether it's the exact same river or not, we can't be dogmatic about it, but it has the same name and it fits the pattern, okay? It's a spring called Gihon, and was it somehow connected to the original Gihon? Right? It's in the Garden of Eden, and a lot of Jewish people will place Jerusalem. I am talking about commentaries. Jewish commentaries will place Jerusalem as part of, you know, the Garden of Eden thing. So I don't want to get dogmatic about it, but it is mentioned Gihon in here, and it's mentioned I think 1 or 2 other times in the account of Kings. But there you go. And as a matter of fact, they know that exact spot where that would have been done now, where King Solomon was crowned king. They know that exact spot. They found it in Jerusalem. You can go down in there and look, and they say, there's no doubt that this is the only place where you could get this number of people and whatever. So you can go and stand exactly where King Solomon was coronated, or whatever the word is, king.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's that?
That's in 1 Kings.
1 Kings 1, and what was that, 33?
33.
Yeah. And there are probably, you know, I could look in Strong's, and there are 1 or 2 other times Gihon is mentioned. Anyway, so it's the same name, Pishon, nobody's really sure. You know, they've taken satellite photos where you can see ancient rivers, and they found other rivers in the area, and, you know, maybe one of them is that, I don't know. But that would have been before the flood, and so things would have been changed dramatically afterward. But the Tigris and Euphrates did survive, at least in some form, from the Garden of Eden. You know, whether they're, anyway, we'll get into all that as we get towards Babylon and all that. But let's see, is there anything else I want to give you out of here? Now, river went out and it parted and became 4 riverheads. You know, now people say it parted and became 4 riverheads, and so we can locate where this was based on that. Well, as I said, if Gihon is completely isolated from the other rivers now, that's not a good call, because things have changed greatly since the flood. So we can't really go up and say it was in Persia. And people like to do that. They like to say the Garden of Eden must have been here, or that little island, you know, by Bahrain, there's that teeny little island. They say this was the original Garden of Eden, and whatever. You know, I disagree with that logic, because things were so changed after the flood that we really can't know for certain. Gold, bdellium, and onyx and stone were there. And, you know, I'm not sure why those stones are mentioned. I'm sure there is a good rabbinic commentary to give. Have you ever read anything on that? I haven't. You know, everything is in here for a reason. And I've just never taken the time to study why those particular stones are mentioned in here.